In the Cosmere, magic and invested arts are key to understanding the stories as well as the history of the peoples that live within them. And all of these magics, for the most part, can trace their origins back to the Shattering, probably the single most important event in the entire Cosmere, where a group of people killed God. These people murdered a deity and then became divine themselves. But what powers were available to these people before they killed Adonalsium? What powers did mortals and other people in the Cosmere have before this event? What we do know comes largely from comments made in passing, little references made here and there throughout the Cosmere, as well as some words of Brandon. But despite this relative lack of information, there's still a lot we can learn about the Cosmere's shadow days.
I'll be pulling information from the following books: the entire Stormlight Archive, The Lost Metal, Tress of the Emerald Sea, Isles of the Emberdark, a little bit from the Cosmere RPG, and various words of Brandon. I'll also reference some concepts from the non-canonical Dragonsteel Prime. For these apocryphal texts, I'll be extra sure to call out when the information comes from these books.
Before going over the types of magics that existed, I think it would be a good idea to understand what the Cosmere looked like before the Shattering as best as we know. Did realmatic theory exist? Was there life outside of Yolen? Was the concept of investiture even a thing?
Before Adonalsium was shattered, most, but not all human life existed on Yolen. Yolen is even considered the birthplace of humanity in the future of the Cosmere. This isn't to say that there weren't other people out there. The singers on Roshar were around before the Shattering, and so were the people who lived on Alaswa. Don't know if you can answer this now, but if everyone is from Yolen way back when, is there a migration story? Not all humans originated on Yolen, but the first humans were there. Watch the books for myths that hint at more.
As a bit of an aside, this would indicate that Adonalsium created humanity in multiple locations throughout the Cosmere, but he did start on Yolen. This also means that there wasn't a great migration of humans out from Yolen before the Shattering to populate the rest of the Cosmere, and this is likely because of a passage from Wind and Truth.
I felt Rays study the planets from afar, then move on to the first in the system. There were many, but 3 as I'd seen could accept life as it is commonly created. Roshar, the second planet, the third planet which attracted souls, and that first one which had humans on it created by my predecessor. I had intended to contact them, bringing them a divinity to worship. Adonalsium created a variety of peoples and planets for its Cosmere. Worlds like Roshar, Lumar, the Grand Apparatus were already created. We know that, at least on Roshar and the Grand Apparatus, Investiture existed in some form before the Shattering. We know this is the case on Roshar because the High Storm existed in some form before the Shattering. We also know this because of the fact that the ancient god Sprend of the Wind, Stone, and Night resided on that planet, and the Dawn Singers had access to different forms by bonding Lesser Sprend. They were also gifted stone shaping by Honor shortly after he arrived to the planet, which is a form of Microkinesis. There are Surge-adjacent invested arts that originated on Yolen. There is a substantial amount of information that we can speculate about regarding these ancient arts from the non-canonical book Dragonsteel Prime. I will bring up how these powers appear to work in the book after I go into what we know to be canon. Microkinesis was an extremely powerful form of magic. It's the ability to manipulate matter at an axial level, axi being the name for what are essentially the atoms of the Cosmere. Practitioners of this art could excite atoms, will fission to take place, and apparently even manipulate spirit webs.
And so I said it seems to be more apparent that different abilities are granted depending on the design of one's spirit web. Is the design of a spirit web and the abilities it grants limited to a specific shard world, or are the designs universal across the Cosmere? For example, could somebody from Roshar go to Scadriel and have hemalurgy done on them and have it work?
Some of the magics are more regionally locked than others. Hemalurgy will work on any planet. Yeah.
Okay.
But for instance, you'll notice that Elantrians have trouble even going to the next station over.
Right.
There's a specific reason for that.
Okay.
Most of the magics transcend location.
Okay, most of them do. So my question in regards to Dragonsteel is there a possibility that somebody with the ability of Microkinesis can see the spirit web and alter it according to their will?
This is totally possible, but you got to remember this is pre-shattering of Adonalsium.
Dragonsteel is pre-shattering?
The Dragonsteel is the story of the shattering of Adonalsium.
So I thought Dragonsteel was after the two before. Oh, okay, so the whole thing is before.
The whole book is before the whole
Okay.
series.
I just finished it the other day.
So there are lots of things going on there that are like you will. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, thanks.
But it's not canon yet.
This incredibly overpowered ability still exists in the Cosmere, but whether it can still manipulate spirit webs or split axes should be taken with a pinch of copper. As the WAB above states, these abilities haven't made canon, and as such are subject to change. I think likely these powers would be weakened a bit before they're made canon. We potentially learn more about Microkinesis in the non-canonical Dragonsteel Prime. It seems similar to the Surge of Division in that book, and if that's the case, and Division behaves similarly to Microkinesis but is regulated, I can understand why Tanavast would want to nerf that ability into the ground.
In that book, Microkinesis was used as a catch-all term for human magics. It included some abilities that seemed to be adjacent to lightweaving. Lightweavers in that book are able to create illusions, bend light, and focus it into destructive lasers. The typical Microkinesis we see performed by the character Jarek is like a souped-up version of the Surge of Division. Jarek is able to light things on fire, disintegrate projectiles into dust, split people in half, and see that which is invisible. It does seem like he's adding more energy into his system in most cases, more heat as it were, exciting the axis to the point of combustion or vaporization, or perhaps breaking the bonds that hold things together to release that heat.
To be clear, these abilities aren't canon, but they do provide some potential examples about how Yolish lightweaving and Microkinesis could work.
Humans aren't the only Yolish known to possess a form of magic. On Yolen, here there be dragons, and ShoDel. Yolen has two competing ecosystems on the planet, life as we know it and Fane. Fane life is like an alternate reality version of normal life. It's almost always bone white. It's almost like abiogenesis happens successfully twice, leading to two competing strains of life, parallel trees of evolution with different bases but heading in the same direction. You can also tell if an animal is Fane by the number of legs or appendages it has, and its coloration. Fane animals generally have 6 appendages. And yes, with 4 legs and 2 wings, that means that dragons are technically Fane-like creatures, though there's plenty that's unique about them. The ShoDel occupy the same ecological niche as humans do, just in the Fane ecosystem. We haven't seen much of them, but they have made more frequent small appearances in the Cosmere in recent books like The Lost Metal, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, The Sunlit Man, and possibly Tress of the Emerald Sea.
To my knowledge, the ShoDel are associated with 2 different magical abilities, one of which is canon. They have a unique heart bone called a Temukek, which they can use to communicate with dragons through prayer faster than light. And it is still possible to communicate with dragons even if this heart organ is extracted from the host. So all you need is the bone to call the dragons, the bone phone. This also works across realms. And a minor side note before moving on, ShoDel and Singers both existed pre-Shattering, and they both have additional magical organs that give them access to magical abilities, and as well as some other similarities in how they look. And apparently that this similarity was deliberate.
So, this is a good question. This is one people have been asking me since the first book if they had one, and I finally kind of confirmed it in book 3. So the reason people don't think Parshendi have a gem heart is it is milky white and looks like bone.
But aren't their bones red?
Their bones, well, their bones are not completely. So if you're going to pull out the bone, what you're going to see, I'll explain it in the next book. So what you're going to do is if you break open the bone, right? Yeah. You're going to find this white what's that? It's not marrow, but it is. Yeah, I guess it's marrow. Yeah. Anyway, at the center kind of in their sternum, there's a gem heart there, but it is fused to the bone. And it's grown into the bone, and you have to kind of snap it open and find inside. And it kind of just looks like marrow, right? But there's a gem heart in there. And so it kind of relates to some stuff in Dragonsteel that I'm not going to get into. But you'll see in the next books. But there's a good reason. People just don't think that Parshendi have a gem heart.
So they must not glow much then, I'm assuming.
What's that? Yeah, well, it's surrounded by bone, right? And so it's a different special thing. We'll bring it out in the following books. It might not be the next one, but yeah, So there you go.
Yeah, thank you.
Are singers and parts related to the Fane life in or important effects? Yeah, they're very similar to Tamifex.
The non-canonical power that ShoDel have in Dragonsteel Prime is something they call cognitive magic. And I don't like this ability. I don't think it makes sense. What it is essentially they can project hallucinations into the minds of other people. And these hallucinations are so real that the bodies of the people who are, getting these images, these attacks, react as if they were getting attacked. So to put it another way, let's imagine that they project an image into the head of a soldier of a beast, and this beast bites them. This only exists in their head, but their bodies would manifest a real bite just because they believe the illusion so much. Like, we know these are actual wounds because other people around them can see them, and even after the ShoDel leave and the illusions are deactivated, they still have these wounds. I don't think this is a balanced ability. I don't like it. So I hope this changes in the future of the Cosmere if the ShoDel still have cognitive magic.
Dragons have always been lurking in the background of the Cosmere as this mysterious element of the past. For the longest time, there were only 2 dragons we knew of, and those were Frost and Cultivation. But over time, we've learned more about dragons, their culture, abilities, and nature in the Cosmere. We now know the names of at least 5 dragons, 2 of which are Shardic vessels.
A lot of this new information comes from Isles of the Emberdark, and it's not really like story spoiler information about dragons, just more about their culture and how they work. But if you don't want those spoilers, you should skip to this timestamp right here.
Dragons are considered highly invested entities. They are technically faint life and capable of incredible feats of strength and endurance. They are functionally immortal, or at least incredibly long-lived. Some of the older dragons are older than the Shattering itself.
Once again, due to limited sample size and the fact that the dragon we've spent the most time literally has her abilities suppressed, we don't really know everything dragons can do. We know that they possess a large amount of investiture. So much, in fact, that when they die, they persist before fading into the beyond for potentially millennia.
It takes dragons so long to fade from this world that their souls have a special place to go while they wait for the process to play out, called the Spirit Shores. An endless beach looking out across an ocean in the spiritual realm, with a line of statue-like dragons waiting to fade into the beyond.
Other abilities include being able to change between human and draconic form at will, being able to communicate with their followers telepathically, faster than light as well, being able to project their true form when they're trapped in their human form. They can also fly. They're resistant to poison, pretty hard to damage, and they're just really strong, apparently.
Before the Shattering, dragons worked in the primordial service of Adonalsium, doing something. Aside from this line from Emberdark, what that service was is unclear. We know that they acted, and some still do, as gods for their followers and the ShoDel, so perhaps they did this on behalf of Adonalsium at some point.
And they don't spit literal fire. Apparently that was metaphorical. But perhaps the most important chunks of Pre-Shattering Investiture that we know of are the Dawnshards. These are the 4 primal commands used by Adonalsium to create all things.
These Dawnshards were used by the group that shattered Adonalsium. I won't go into the motives of the members of that group here, but know that they had a variety of different reasons and views on why Adonalsium needed to die.
In the next section, I'll be going over the 2 Dawnshards that we know of, and this will be pulling information from the books Dawnshard and Wind and Truth. If you don't want spoilers for Wind and Truth and Dawnshard, I would recommend skipping to this timestamp right here. The 2 named Dawnshards are Exist and Change, held by Sigil and Risen respectively. And I have a bit of a gripe with the naming conventions for Dawnshard itself. Sanderson says that when someone holds a Dawnshard, they are a Dawnshard. So if you were to ask, like, is Sigil holding a Dawnshard? Sanderson would say, no, Sigil is a Dawnshard, which I think is stupid. He should be called the holder of the Dawnshard, and you call the Dawnshard Exist the Dawnshard. Anyway, moving on. As I mentioned before, the Dawnshards are the 4 primal commands used to create all things by Adonalsium, and I interpret these commands as instructions a god would have to give to a universe for that universe to run independently. I thought this when we only knew Change, and I think this even more now that we have Exist. To me, Exist is the Dawnshard of object permanence. Matter that exists in the universe is commanded to continue to exist.
Holders of this Dawnshard stop aging and become nearly indestructible. They possess a connection to the entire Cosmere, but this may just come as a side effect of holding any Dawnshard. This connection allows the holder of the Exist Dawnshard to feed off of any form of investiture. Also, when Hoid initially found this Dawnshard, he apparently just stumbled upon it, not a clue in the world what it was, and became its unwitting carrier. What insane main character energy. Change is the command that allows things to, well, change. It's described as the demand of a god to remake things, to demand they be better, the power to change. Be it division, addition, position, polarity, or phase, it is the mechanism that allows for change. A fun little thing I realized about the Change Dawnshard while I was researching this video is that it arrived on Roshar after the Ashen Exodus. For whatever reason, I had thought that it got to the planet with the Ashenites, but this is wrong. Cord of the Unkalaki mentions that they have songs and stories about when the Dawnshard came through the pool at the Horneater Peaks, which means that the Unkalaki would have had to have been there, and they couldn't have been there before humans arrived to the planet, unless they arrived before the Ashenites through Cultivation's pool and just stayed at the peaks, or perhaps those are songs that are passed down to them by the singer side of their ancestry. We also learn in Isles of the Emberdark that the dragons have or had possession of one of the Dawnshards. At one point, it was in a magic vault, but was later moved. Which Dawnshard they possess or possessed is unknown. I think it's a different Dawnshard from the other two that we know of. It's theorized that each of the 16 shards is associated with one of the 4 Dawnshards in some way. This line of thinking is supported by a mural found in the book Dawnshard, as well as something that Honor calls Adonalsium's 4 aspects in Wind and Truth.
Honor clearly knows what a Dawnshard is. So why would he say something different for the 4 attributes if they were the Dawnshards? For this reason, I think that Adonalsium's 4 attributes and the 4 Dawnshards are 2 separate things.
Moving on to Aethers. Aethers can be thought of as ancient giant spren in the sense that they can form a magical bond with people. Aethers claim to be at the same power level as a shard, and unlike a spren though, a single primal Aether is able to bond multiple people at a time.
Well, obviously the shards are like the top dogs in terms of power and stuff, but Hoid seems to be his own level of dangerous. Are there any other characters as sort of rivals to his ambition or power?
It depends on how you want to express it. Some of the dragons from Yolen are as old and are very crafty. You could argue that the Aethers, the actual core Aethers, are as ancient and potentially powerful, right? I wouldn't put them straw power on shard level, but they would claim that they are. So depends on what you would think there. There are some other individuals of a similar, not as dangerous as Hoid, but on a similar level, been around for thousands of years, investigated a lot of the magics and these sorts of things, but there's a few for you.
Being bound to a primal Aether turns someone into an Aether bound, and this allows that person to manipulate and generate Aethers at will. They do this through use of the Luhel bond, which is a bond between them and their primal Aether, where they exchange water from their bodies for access to power. There are 12 confirmed types of Aethers, and we've seen 6 used in the books. And these Aethers are Verdant, Rose, Zephyr, Midnight, Sun, and Crimson. The other types of Aethers aren't confirmed, but it is speculated that they are related or have to do with the 10 essences from Roshar. Aethers are confirmed to have existed before the Shattering, but not necessarily predating Adonalsium despite the claims of the primal Aethers from Dartree. We do know that the Investiture used to power the Aethers is independent of any of the shards.
Aethers have been seen to take 2 different forms, and a third has been mentioned. Let's start with the primal Aethers. These are large invested entities that can bond to multiple people and create something called an Aether bound. One of the abilities that these Aether bound possess is the ability to request information from the primal Aether. The primal Aether that the Aether bound is connected to is ancient and has a lot of information. Additionally, they can request information from other Aetherbound who are bonded to the same Aether that they are.
The other type of Aether we see in the Cosmere are Prime Aethers, which are different from Primal Aethers. I know they're similar terms, but they're different. Okay? Great. Prime, my good man.
Prime Aethers are overgrown Aethers that reside on the moons of Lumar, and these are what drop down the spores onto the planet. These Aethers are more volatile and difficult to control, but they can also be used by anyone. They violently activate when they come into contact with water.
Silver is able to deactivate Aethers coming from spores, but it's unclear if that same weakness applies to Aethers grown by Aetherbound or even the primal Aethers themselves. Silver does have some strange properties in the Cosmere, so I would not be surprised if they disrupt them just the same. The last type of Aether we've heard of only comes from a single line, and it is a wild Aether. I don't know, man. And finally, the newest shiny object for us to theorize about. Ancient Cosmere gods. Apparently, Adonalsium didn't just create the entire Cosmere, with a couple of exceptions that the shards made, but he also left these worlds some gods. These are chunks of his investiture that acted on his behalf.
After the Shattering, these chunks of Adonalsium's power were rekeyed to one of the 16 shards, and some have even been warped and changed over time, either deliberately by shards or due to the passage of time and the perceptions of mortals. I invested this land, restoring godhood. There were echoes, of course, of my predecessor, little bits of him left behind. 3 powerful incarnations who had his voice, and many smaller ones representing aspects of nature and personality. We learned about the existence of these entities for the first time in Wind and Truth, but there are potentially some that exist in Dragonsteel Prime.
These canonical god spren are the Wind, the Stone, and the Night. Chunks of Investiture Adonalsium left behind with specific commands to protect, nurture, and shroud. A weird thing is, the primordial gods of Roshar simultaneously exist in their ancient form as well as being made and incorporated into current bondsmith level spren. It's really weird.
Now, things with these ancient spren get a little strange. These ancient gods still exist despite parts of them being made into other new powerful entities. The Wind still exists, although it's an echo of what it once was. As with all spren, thoughts give them strength, and the Wind is mostly forgotten. Part of the Wind was made into the Stormfather, part of the Stone was made into the Sibling, and part of the Night was made into the Night Watcher.
This next section will contain spoilers for Chapter 3 of the Stonewalkers campaign from the Cosmere RPG, so if you don't want those story spoilers, skip to this timestamp right here.
As part of the Stonewalkers campaign, you encounter a mysterious spren under Rathalas called the Grey Remnant. The Grey Remnant is an ancient spren that the text claims to be on the same level as the Night Watcher, while it simultaneously considers the Night Watcher to be its mother, meaning it likely is or was capable of forming a bondsmith. This spren has been hidden and isolated for thousands of years under Rathalas. It inhabits the stones and seeks connection to the physical realm after thousands of years of being forgotten. It resembles reaching hands made of melting stone or wet clay or maybe even creme, and it seeks truth, specifically painful truth.
The fact that the Grey Remnant is ancient and associated with the stone is fascinating to me. Because, what is the Grey Remnant? We know that the Sibling is the bondsmith spren that is grown out of the essence of the stone, but then what is the Grey Remnant? Is it an echo of what the stone used to be? Is it the stone now in its warped state? I don't think that's the case either, because Venli speaks to the stones in Rhythm of War. I really don't know what to make of this guy, and I'd love to hear your theories for what the Grey Remnant is in the comments down below. There are a few other pre-shattering godlike entities I'd like to talk about briefly and speculate on the existence of some others. Starting with the Grand Apparatus, which is something that's been teased by Sanderson for a couple of years, and we actually learned something about it for the first time in Isles of the Emberdark. This is apparently a giant megastructure that existed pre-shattering that is now associated with the shard invention.
To me, the Grand Apparatus sounds like it could easily become a hellish maze. Your sense of place would be constantly shifting due to the shuffling rooms. It also sounds like not all of these rooms are benign. Apparently, the Sleepless control the structure to create tests and experiments for the inhabitants of the Grand Apparatus, almost like a giant aperture labs. It's, quote, cities made of thousands upon thousands of moving rooms, controlled by some giant mechanism, overseen by the Sleepless and powered by unseen Investiture. Another potential chunk of power deliberately left behind by Adonalsium is Cusicesh. This giant water-like entity has hundreds of shifting faces, and it's technically not a spren. It's a spren-adjacent entity that guides the Iriali along their long trail.
But one of the things that we were curious about with Cusicesh, it seems like he's serving as a guide to wherever they're going next, maybe Lumar, maybe somewhere else. And is he the guide for just this leg of their journey, or was he with them when they came to Roshar and he is kind of leading them on?
So he is the guide for this leg of their journey, but he is not actually a spren.
Not actually a spren. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Axis gets them wrong sometimes. Okay.
What's that?
I said, I guess Axis gets some things wrong sometimes.
Axis, yep. Axis would have to categorize him correctly as a spren adjacent entity. which is how he's categorized Scions when he's met them.
Cusicesh is ancient, and what's really weird is he was able to open Honor's perpendicularity, which would indicate some connection to Honor, which is especially weird because Cusicesh might not be a Rosharan native.
She doesn't even go here!
Do you even go to this school?
No. And he certainly can't be a bondsmith level spren. He can't make a bondsmith. The last potential godlike entity I'd like to mention is pretty much entirely speculation on my part. In the book Wind and Truth, the Wind says that she and Time are cousins. And that makes me think that Time might be one of these godlike entities that Adonalsium left behind. What makes this a little complicated, though, is it is capital T Time, but it's a capital at the start of a sentence. So it really could go either way. I don't know. She might have just been waxing poetic about how she erodes things with, like, time. Or time could be a god that Adonalsium left behind.
There are also potentially some metals that are similar to godlike metals that could exist in the Cosmere independent of shards. Brandon says that he's considering god metals to be something he calls the essence of the 16. These are the god metals associated with the shards as well as the other forms of the shards investiture.
This means that there are potentially other magical metals in the Cosmere that aren't associated with shards, like Dragonsteel, Adonalsium's god metal, or whatever the weird soul and investiture attracting metal at the core of Brazen Canticle is.
Did any god metals exist prior to the Shattering, like either associated with Adonalsium or one that would become associated with the shard or something else like that?
Yeah, I'm going to wrap with this one now, Marvin, but I can talk about why on this case. Basically, I do have a god metal designed for Adonalsium, and I do not know if it will work when I write those books. This is one of those things that I'm like, I don't know if I want to go, right? Like, and so we will see if I do or don't, right? Like a lot of that stuff from Yolen's a little up in the air till I write Dragonsteel Prime, because there's been so many iterations, right? Like, or not Dragon. So when I write actual Dragonsteel, like in Dragonsteel Prime, we've had the weapons designed, and at various points, even in Dragonsteel Prime's chronology, I had either Father God dead or not dead yet, and that the weapons had been locked away. You're right, and so, but then there's children gods in Dragonsteel Prime that I, abandoned. And so I'm staying away from that one. If it's relevant, it'll be relevant in Dragonsteel.
Okay.
And very quickly on. Yeah. Right now there is, but it's very loosely tacked to the board.
I mean, we kind of want to figure out what the fourth moon might be made of. So like maybe, but okay, that's it. Could indicate at least already.
Okay, we'll see. We'll see if we can round off like a god metal Rapho trio here or not. So I'll rephrase this a little bit to maybe try to get it at something that you can answer.
Okay.
Braze's core has an interesting metal as well.
It does.
Would you consider this metal to be a god metal or no?
So I would not consider it to be a god metal.
Okay. Okay. And that would have been something that would have been set up when Adonalsium created the system.
This was not placed there by any of the shards.
Okay.
Of Adonalsium. So would I call it a god metal? This is where we get into it, right? Like, what do we consider a god metal? And things like this. It is not a god metal of one of the 16 shards. There you go.
That is excellent.
I would not consider it a god metal of one of the 16 shards. It was not placed there by one of the 16 shards.
We love to do what is here. So if you want to answer what is a god metal, we'd be happy to run through it.
It depends. Like right now, what is a god metal? Right now, I call the god metals the essences of the 16. Right. But god metal is a term that like kind of developed naturally in the community, right? It's not really like a thing that the early in-world characters could even really define. And so there's something wonky about the moon, and bits of it hit the planet. So, you know, there's maybe some myths and stories on Roshar that you might have heard that have something to do with this. And some of those, all of those stories mean something. So there you are.
These metals don't necessarily need to be associated with any entity. They could just be naturally occurring metals in the Cosmere.
Adonalsium may have made other child gods. 5 of these appear in the non-canonical Dragonsteel Prime. They are Salonis, Rafit, Darus, Ethane, and Aranak. These 5 Yolish gods exist in a weird semi-canonical state despite being from the non-canonical Dragonsteel Prime. Brandon has used the name Salonis for another nature god in the canon Cosmere, but when asked, he's indicated that he does plan for some of these Adonalsium sub-gods to have some canon form.
Did Adonalsium ever create any avatars? That's... So, I'm not going to raffle this. I'm going to give you an answer, but here's the thing on this answer. Some of these things are canon in stuff I've done so far that I may not canonize going forward, right? The answer is yes. In original outlines going back to Dragonsteel and things like this, the answer is yes, that you would have seen that. Will I do that when I write the actual series? I cannot guarantee. So it's a tentative yes, but it is not it's not canon yet.
But until then, we'll consider them not but Sanderson curiosities. And as you can see, the history of magic and magical entities stretches back really far in the Cosmere, despite us not having really that much information about it. It's only now that the shadows of the distant past are receiving beams of light from the modern Cosmere. I think that's all I got for you now. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and share it with all your friends who enjoy the Cosmere. And if you want to see more cool content like this, you could consider becoming a channel member or a Patreon member. There's a link to my Patreon in the description down below. And a special thank to my draconic patrons, Mac and Dennis. I couldn't do this without you guys, and I appreciate it. Thanks for watching, have an excellent time of day, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye.